Well, the theme tonight is, or this afternoon, is peace and prosperity for the people. And Coley asked me to speak about the Green New Deal, which is our domestic program. But let me just start by saying that our foreign policy grows out of our domestic policy. And we're living in a system of capitalism that is endless growth by any means necessary, including exploiting the people, destroying nature, using racism to divide workers and super exploit one class and make the other part of the working class think they're better off because those other folks are worse off. The same institutions and ideologies and sensibilities that allowed us to do that at home is what we do to people abroad. So it's all connected. Now, let's talk about New York, because we're in a state that has the highest inequality of wealth and income of any state in the United States. And the United States has the highest degree of wealth and inequality and income inequality of any industrial nation in the world. And that wealth is concentrated over there on Wall Street. And those folks are on welfare. They are not pulling their weight. They're not paying taxes. The state had $16 billion they collected in a stock transfer tax last year. This is a tax instituted in 1905, and the state kept the money until 1981. But that was when Governor Carey and Lieutenant Governor Mario Cuomo decided they would start rebating the money to the rich folks in order to encourage them to invest. You know, they talk about the Republicans today being the party of no. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party was the party of yes in the era of Reagan. And we got tax cuts for the rich. It was a bipartisan policy. So since 1981, they've been rebating the stock transfer tax. And with the computerized training on internal account by JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, 70% of the trades on Wall Street now are computerized trading, which is really insider trading, because they know when our pension funds or us as individuals are going to make a stock trade, they got a direct line in there and they got these computer programs that enable them to do a little arbitrage and make money every time. They're jumping ahead on insider knowledge. And it's systematic and they're skimming off money. And then they're not paying the taxes on it. This computerized trading should just be abolished because it's just skimming money off the system. Now, what have they done with the money that they got? Because it's not just the stock transfer tax. It's flattened out income tax. It's federal policies that tax capital gains at 15%, while those of us who work for a living are paying 25 or 30%, and so on. And they're supposed to be investing. What are they doing? They're speculating. You know, they are mergers and acquisitions, stock buybacks, derivatives. And what they're doing is rearranging who owns what's already out there in terms of productive assets. They are not creating new productive assets, which we as Greens want to be sustainable productive assets. We need a whole new system of wealth creation that is based on assets, productive things that are based on renewable, sustainable energy and materials. But they're not doing it, and we're in an economic depression. So anyway, they had $16 billion last year. They gave it back to Wall Street and told us we had a fiscal crisis. We had a $9 billion deficit instead of a $7 billion surplus because of that. And then who do they want to make pay for it? The people that work for the state and deliver the services. And Andrew Cuomo has said we're going to tangle with those public unions. When he introduced the lieutenant governor candidate from Mayor Rochester, Robert Duffy, former cop who's now the mayor, and he has tangled with the public unions, Cuomo said, and guess what? We're going to tangle with the public unions statewide. And then on Labor Day, Cuomo said the unions got to sacrifice like they did back in the 70s when, you know, Big Mac came over and took the city over and basically cut the people's services and made the working class pay for it. They want to make the workers pay for the budget gap when the fact is there shouldn't be a budget gap because the people on Wall Street aren't paying their taxes. That's the root of the financial crisis. So our program is tax the rich for a Green New Deal. Besides the stock transfer tax, that's $16 billion. Now, they pay themselves bonuses. $20 billion is a conservative estimate by the state comptroller. Cash bonuses. I'm for a 50% cash bonus tax. That would raise another $10 billion. These are bankers who we bailed out, and then they put about $1 million each in their pocket as a bonus. You know, that's ill-gotten gain, and we should at least put 50% of that into the public treasury. That's another $10 billion. And then if we went back to the progressive income tax structure of the old Republicans, the Rockefeller Republicans that we had in 1972, we could cut the tax rate for 95% of New Yorkers, and because the top 5% are getting so much of the income now, we would still raise $8 billion more in revenues. You put those three together, those 3 reforms is $34 billion. You subtract the $9 billion deficit we're facing, you got $25 billion surplus. And that's how we're going to fund the Green New Deal. And the rich are going to pay their fair share so we can do that. Now, what's the Green New Deal? You know, we've got to bust the myth that the Democrats still stand for anything like the New Deal legacy. They totally abandoned it at the leadership level. You can find a Kucinich or a Cynthia McKinney when she was in the Democratic Party member of Congress who still stood for the things that the old New Deal stood for. But the leadership, no. You know, old man Cuomo was a New Deal Democrat when he talked, but a new Democrat when he walked. In other words, he talked left and walked right. And he could preach the old religion, but when it came to cutting things, he did it. Well, his son's just a straight-up new Democrat, which is like an old Republican. And we got to realize the old Republicans are like now the know-nothings party, right? They don't know nothing except that it's foreigners. And, of course, what that also means black folks. And today also means Latinos and Muslims instead of Catholics like it was back when the know-nothings were, you know, running as a pro-slavery party. So, you know, that's where the whole spectrum moves to the right, which means what we're putting out should have majority support. And when we talk about the Green New Deal, we are saying we're going to pick up the torch that the Democrats have dropped. Income support for the poor, the unemployed, the disabled, and the elderly. You know, they got Social Security in their sights at the federal level. Clinton abandoned welfare for, you know, AFDC, families with dependent children. There was a statistic just came out from a Women's Policy Institute. There are like 6 million single mother families that are qualified for temporary assistance to needy families. Only about 500,000 of them are getting their aid because they're churning the rolls because the states don't want to pay for their share. So they're putting everybody on food stamps. 1 out of 6 Americans is now on food stamps. I mean, that's where we're at in this recession. So we're going to support the income support. We're going to recover the goals that the Democrats had forgot to even have, like single-payer health care. They used to call it national health insurance. That was instituted or proposed with the original Social Security Act in the 30s. And it got cut out to pass Social Security. They tried again after World War II, and they tried again in the early 70s with the Kennedy National Health Insurance Bill. Well, this time when we came, like in the 90s, they just put it off the table. Single payers off the table, even though the majority of people were for it in all the polls, and the majority of physicians were for it. That's your new Democrats. They're not New Deal Democrats. And we've got to disabuse people of the notion, because most rank and file Democrats do support these programs, and they think they're voting for Democrats who support it when they don't. The other thing is full employment. I mean, nobody even remembers that. There was no discussion of that. It was the goal of that Social Security Act. They called it an Employment Assurance Program. And it meant everybody who couldn't get a job in the private sector, the government would be the employer of last resort. So able-bodied people who wanted to work would contribute something and earn their way in the world. You know, we have a work ethic, and that's how you realize the American dream. That's how people feel like they're pulling their own weight and feel good about themselves. And so it's, you know, really tragic that so many people are and underemployed. Well, that was a goal that they raised in the 30s. There was a full employment bill that got gutted after World War II, and then the Humphrey Hawkins full employment bill, which became the Humphrey Hawkins Employment and Stable Growth Bill, which was really about inflation. And they never said the government would be the employer of resort when it became the legislation. And then we're in the middle of a recession. They don't talk about these public jobs programs. It's not even on the table. It's not even anywhere near the table. So we're going to bring that back. And then the other thing we're going to do is green the New Deal, which means we're going to bring in ecology. So another thing that part of the New Deal is you invest in a recession. You don't, you know, balance the budget and have a fiscal austerity program. When consumer demand is down because consumers are over indebted and deleveraging, and business won't invest because they don't see the consumers, the only thing that can fill the demand gap is government spending. And the program we're getting from Andrew Cuomo, which is free state spending, and which means, in effect, cut schools, cut transit, cut state workers. A bunch of them are going to get their pink slips here in the fall before the election from Patterson, who kind of wants to do it before the next guy takes over. That's a recipe for an endless cycle of deficit, debt, and depression. Because if government doesn't step up with demand, the economy is going to go down further, the tax revenue is going to go down further, and then the balance of budget is going to have to do further cuts. So it's a vicious cycle downward. And so that's another piece of the New Deal. But to green the New Deal, we're going to bring in ecology, sustainable, you know, investment. So renewable energy, clean manufacturing, organic agriculture, mass transit, green buildings. This is what will put us back to work. It's what needs to be built. We have excess capacity. Part of the reason for the stagnation is it's only operating at 2/3 capacity. They can produce more than we can buy back. Okay, and so what we want to do is build a new productive apparatus. So that's green in the New Deal. And so now I just want to say a couple things about what the governor can do about peace directly, aside from the Green New Deal, which creates a domestic policy of, equality and harmony and freedom, so that we're not misusing and abusing people overseas for, the advantage of those folks on Wall Street. And that is, we have Reaper drones operating out of Hancock Air Force Base just north of Syracuse, who are, by robot, wreaking devastation on people from the sky. It's like aliens, I think, to those people. It's like the, Martians have come. And what they have done is made us in central New York and the Syracuse area part of the battlefield. And, the members of Congress, first the Republican and then the Democrat who replaced them, says, isn't it great the pilots can go and bomb people? They don't quite put it that way, and then go home to their house in the suburbs and eat dinner with their family. But the problem is that makes us part of the battlefield. So as governor, I would demand that the Reapers be taken out of Hancock Air Force Base, and I'd also demand that our National Guard be brought home. Troops home now. I know a lot of people in the National Guard, they did not sign up to be an occupation army. They signed up to provide disaster relief and that kind of thing at home. And I'll tell you, I'm a former Marine, and, Marines, they're like the ones ready to fight when it's time to fight. But, I have fellows that I know, their kids are now joined the Marines. They've been in Helmand Province. And these are Vietnam vets. These guys are facing more than people in Vietnam faced. They are going for repeated tours of duty. They're getting shot at, not just one battle every once in a while, but several times a day as they do their patrols. It's just hell over there, and they're not sure why they're fighting. They're Marines. They do what they signed up for. They feel they ought to do it. But I'll tell you, their parents, who are also Marines, are questioning it. So I think the anti-war sentiment's there, but there's no party expressing it except the Green Party. So the last thing I'll say is, when I started this campaign, I said it's not me running, it's we running. We will not get our 50,000 votes, let alone 500,000 votes to change the politics of the state, unless everybody here contributes some money, volunteers some time, and spreads the word. So I hope you will join us. Thank you.